Chapter 4, Visualization. Okay, it's time to get more technical. What happens in your brain when you are motivated toward your major goals and when you aren't? How is it that some people are able to push through the distractions of hunger, anxiety, and discomfort and work toward their goals anyway? The reason that our motivation is flexible, is that our brain and body don't know the difference between what is happening in the real world, and what is happening inside our mind's eye. In other words, we can use visualization in order to tell our body that there is a threat or a great reward to work toward, and if we are good enough at this, it can become so real that it triggers a huge flood of hormones. For example, imagine that you genuinely believe there is a murderer outside your window right now. There is not one, but the very fact that you believe there is, means that your body is going to be flooded with adrenaline, cortisol, and other stress-related hormones. You'll experience a physiological response that causes you to shake, tremble, and even bring up your food. You will have no problem motivating yourself to check outside the window, or to hide under the covers. Neuroscientists are increasingly subscribing to a theory called embodied cognition. This states that we think by using visualization in order to understand the world. What is meant by this? Well, once upon a time, scientists believed in something called mental ACE. This was the hypothetical universal machine code of the human brain. Scientists wanted to understand how humans were able to garner meaning from conversation and spoken/written language. In other words, when we understand language, how is this happening? What are we translating that language into in order to comprehend it? In lieu of any real answer, mental ACE was suggested as a possibility. Embodied cognition suggests that there is no universal machine code, and that instead we comprehend meaning and language by relating it to our own physical experiences. We essentially play a little animation of what we are reading or listening to, using our own senses and our own bodies to understand it. So, when someone tells you that they walked through the woods, you understand this by visualizing trees and by remembering the feeling of leaves crunching underfoot. When you discuss maths, you understand it by relating that to your own experiences with quantities and objects. Our understanding is rooted in our physical experience, even if you aren't consciously aware of this happening. Brain scans appear to confirm this theory, or at least lend support to it. They show that when we hear a story or think about something, areas of our motor cortex and sensory cortices light up as though we were using them. And as such, as far as the body is concerned, there is little difference between walking through a cold wood and actually walking through the wood. The experience is very similar, and as such, the hormonal response is also very similar. Likewise, when you're struggling to get out of bed in the morning, you will have a flash of realization when you think about the repercussions. You might very briefly imagine yourself being fired, shamed, and destitute. And this is just as real as that feeling of comfort in bed. This is how you can motivate yourself to do something. When you think about what could be gained by working on your physique, or by writing that book, or by working on your business, you will visualize that end point. Again, this might happen unconsciously. This can release a huge amount of dopamine, the reward hormone, which controls motivation and goal-oriented behavior. This will then activate a pattern of activity in the brain called the salience network. This is the part of the brain that causes us to switch attention from one thing to another and then to hold that focus. This network is made up of the executive control network, conscious control of attention and motivation, and the dorsal attention network, reflexive response to stimuli. One of the key brain areas involved in this is called the anterior cingulate cortex. When that part of the brain is damaged, it can leave a person with absolutely zero attention or motivation. They find it impossible to stick to tasks and eventually become completely inert. So, how then can you use visualization in order to work toward your goals? The first tip is to make sure that the thing you're working towards is something that you feel extremely passionate about. This is perhaps the most important way to stay motivated and disciplined, to have an end goal that you truly care about. One that you get excited thinking about. This is something that Arnie always said, that he was happy to go through rep after rep of grueling work in the gym, simply because he believed that every single one of those reps would bring him closer to his goal of being Mr. Olympia. You need a goal like that in order to stay motivated. What if you don't know your life purpose or your end goal? That's fine. You don't need to be changing the world here. Even working toward a short-term, immediate goal will have similar benefits. Just make sure that there is always something you are working on and toward. You need to make sure that this goal you are working toward is something that speaks to you emotionally. That means it should be something that you feel will help you become actualized, but at the same time it should also be something that will help you build respect, that will help you to support your family, and that will ensure you put food on the table. In other words, the more of your needs the ambition and the goal meets, the greater your chances of success. What if the thing you're working on doesn't have any emotional payoff for you? What if you need to focus on a project given to you by your dense manager? Notice how this is the kind of work you really struggle with. The answer is A. Think about the reason you need to do this work. In this case, focus on what career success might mean for you. B. Try to make the work you're doing more inherently engaging. If you're writing a dull article about something you don't care about, try and find what is exciting about that topic. Or challenge yourself to write the very best article with the best structure and the best grammar possible. This will help your work to truly come alive. Focus on the fear. Humans are naturally risk-averse. Again, this is an evolutionary hangover that once made a lot of sense in terms of our survival. We couldn't afford to take big risks with our safety or our resources, and so we would cling to things we needed. This was effective back then, but today it has the effect of making us somewhat static and unchanging. We are happy to stick with the status quo because at least it is safe and predictable. One answer then is to focus more on the stick as well as the carrot. In the case of completing dull work, try to think about what will happen if you are late-handing in your work again. Think about the awkward conversation, and the stress it will cause regarding your job satisfaction. A small amount of stress, called eustress, is a positive thing. Too much is bad for motivation, but this is something we'll address in an upcoming chapter. Another thing to consider is the threat of not progressing. What happens if you don't work on your physique? Simple, you stay out of shape forever, and get progressively worse. You never fix your self-esteem, and you create more and more health problems that make it even harder to turn things around. What happens if you never start applying for other jobs, or negotiate higher pay? You potentially remain stuck in a dead-end job for the rest of your life. Or at least miss out on huge amounts of money that could make you and your family much happier. Those are some pretty compelling sticks. In the latter example, the hope is that the threat of being stuck in the same position forever is enough of an emotional motivation, a tangible enough vision, to override the slightly awkward thought of having to talk about salary with your boss/clients. Priming. Another tip is to use something called priming. Priming means getting yourself into the right mental state for the work you need to complete. Not to be confused with neural priming, which is a completely different, though interesting, topic. For example then, if you need to work out but can't muster the motivation to do so, you can always try watching a motivational video of someone training instead. Likewise, if you are struggling to stay focused on your work, you could watch a video of someone else being productive. Doing this helps to light up the right brain areas. Our mirror neurons and natural empathy help us to feel as though we are working on the thing we need to work on. And the encouraging music and dramatic angles trigger the desired emotional response. Environment, again. Similarly, you can also motivate yourself by using the right environment. We already discussed how you could remove distractions and thus make it easier to concentrate on what you're supposed to be focused on. But how about tuning the environment to support and encourage maximum productivity? This concept was explored in depth in the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. There, The author discussed the possibility of creating a space designed entirely around the concept of encouraging productivity and inspiration. This space included areas filled with inspirational items and great works, for example, that would help to inspire and subtly influence the person trying to be productive. We can create something similar in our own office environments and even our own gyms, by filling them with things that will make us feel productive and inspired to do our best work. So, by considering all these factors, we can hack our motivation and become the most productive and hard-working versions of ourselves. Not by reasoning with ourselves and trying to convince ourselves to work harder, but by making the work we're doing become the thing we can't stop thinking about.